Hey, hello, and welcome back to video number 3 of this mini series about how to understand and navigate our way around emotionally manipulative behavior. As I mentioned all the way through this course so far, it's not enough just to simply call somebody a narcissist or 10 top tips to stop the narcissist or gaslighter. If you're going to break free of emotionally manipulative behavior that people can project onto you, you have to get specific. Now, this is the third video in the series, but is the second emotionally manipulative behavior that we're going to cover, and it is called the Saviour emotionally manipulative behavior. Now, if you haven't watched the first video, I highly recommend watching that first because it is going to give you a grounding structure and a foundation about how emotional manipulative behavior is created in the first place. And then in the last video, we talked about the first emotional manipulative behavior, which is about the oppressed victim, which relies on guilt in their target. But again, the first video talks about how it hides in plain sight and poses as one thing, but is actually something completely different, and which is why millions of people can go through emotionally manipulative behavior being projected onto them. And sometimes, no matter how hard they fight, no matter how hard they try to justify what's going on, no matter how hard they try to communicate with other people to break that cycle, they actually become more and more trapped in this Chinese thumb lock analogy, which is you get those Chinese thumb locks, your natural instincts try to break free, but the more you try to break free, the more trapped you become. So now let's take a look at the Saviour emotionally manipulative behavior, which is very codependent with the last emotionally manipulative behavior we talked about, which is the oppressed victim. So let's take it to the screen. The content or information in these videos is for educational and informational purposes only. It is your responsibility what you do with this information. So here we can see these characters are very visual for showing what is actually going on. And the Saviour emotional manipulative behavior is carrying another person. Now, as mentioned in the last video, the one thing that you will see as a red flag for emotional manipulative behavior is it's not just here and there every now and again, it's constant. So it's good to help each other out every now and again, get somebody back on their feet if they're going through a tough time, and then you go along your merry way, and they go along the merry way. But a saviour will constantly save other people, will constantly pick up the tab, will constantly do all the work, as you can see here. Okay, so the Saviour emotionally manipulative behaviour is the same structure as we did in the last video, and the 6 areas to give a greater understanding of what's actually going on. So number 1, what is the manipulation itself? So as mentioned earlier, the Saviour emotional manipulation will continually look after or rescue or save, or whatever title you want to use, always look after everybody else. Now, this is a tricky one. Remember, emotionally manipulative behavior hides in plain sight. It poses as one thing, but is something more sinister behind the scenes. Because being a saviour appears to be a really kind gesture, somebody who wants to support other people. And sometimes we can meet people in a saviour role and we think they are the salt of the earth. They are the person that we want by our side when we are going through the worst time of our lives. However, if it's an emotional manipulation, rather than just trying to genuinely help somebody out, it can leave us trapped in them doing all the work for us, and we get weaker and weaker and weaker, so we start to become codependent on them. So the manipulation is they do everything for everybody else. It appears that they're being very kind and supportive, but actually it's making a person weaker. The target's vulnerability, remember person B, so person A is the person using the emotional manipulation, person B is the target of that emotional manipulation. The vulnerability, remember, if a person has a vulnerability to the emotional manipulation, they will trigger and be caught in that loop. The target's vulnerability is a belief, I can't do this myself, I need help, I'm too weak, I'm really struggling. Now, if you've watched the prior video when we talked about the oppressed victim, you can now see how the oppressed victim emotional manipulative behavior And the Saviour emotional manipulative behaviour can be incredibly codependent. So the target believes they're helpless, but if it's an emotional manipulation of saying I'm helpless to get other people to feel guilty and then help them out, the Saviour steps in by using the emotional manipulation, and the two start to attract each other and feel that they need each other. But if that sounds a little bit confusing at the moment, it'll make more sense as we go further along through the video. Number 3, an example emotional manipulation that the Saviour could use, and there are many, many subgenres of each one of these 6 emotional manipulative behaviours that we're going to talk about. So an example could be a person who shares about a challenge in their relationships, and then the Saviour starts to imply that what that person's going through, i.e. their target, is actually much worse than they believe. So person A is listening to person B talk. That sounds really intense. You must be really overwhelmed. You need my help. I'm going to help you through this. And then person B starts to feel, well, actually, I thought it was bad, but maybe it's really, really, really bad, and I don't know what to do. I need somebody else's help. And then the person using the Saviour emotional manipulation will say, well, I'll help you out. Now, we can see this very often when people say go through a bad time in a relationship and somebody's always there listening on the other end of the phone, or always wanting to spend time to support them. And we get trapped in this thing of thinking, well, things are really tough and they're such a kind person to help out. But what might be happening is we get caught up in this loop without even realizing it. And as mentioned, there are many subgenres about this. It could be a person who, maybe person B has an insecurity about their own finances. So person A, using the Saviour emotional manipulation, will start to pay for everything. And then soon enough, that starts to exasperate that belief in person B that they can't afford things themselves and need other people to support them financially. And again, the more codependent they get, the more tangled they become in each other's lives, and it gets more and more complex. Okay, and then number 4, which is an example combination. Now, this is where, if you remember from the last video, where a person using one emotionally manipulative behaviour, if the target tries to break free, thereby the person A using the emotional manipulative behaviour might feel robbed of their power or their relief of anxiety by causing a target to feel manipulated. This is where they might start to use a different emotional manipulation to cause confusion in their target, so the target comes back into the fold, as it were, and the game continues. So what it could be is a person using a Saviour emotional manipulation could offer support to their target that appears unconditional. I'll do this for you. You don't need to do anything back for me. I want to give and give and give and give. And that sounds great until things start to change behind the scenes. It'll always be subtle at first, but then that person might start to make expectations of them. And then the person using the Saviour role might actually turn into the victim, which we discussed in the last video. So it could be a person gives somebody a lift to work every day if they are having car trouble, for example. They give them a lift every day, they get up early every day, they help them out in every way they can. And then when they keep saying, well, you don't need to pay me back, it's fine, I'm giving all this to you, then one day they might start to say, can you give me a lift to the airport? But by that time, the person who is the target has been helped again and again and again, may start to feel, well, I don't really want to drive all the way to the airport if it's hundreds of miles away, for example. But then they feel, well, this person has done lots for me, so now I feel guilty. Remember, the oppressed victim relies on guilt. So people can use the Saviour role to get up all this credit by doing everything for everybody else or one particular person if it's their target. But then they might start to play the victim and say, well, without saying it, of course, I have been there for you in all these times and I'm only asking something small from you. But then the guilt in the target takes over and the roles have reversed. Okay, and then moving on to area number 5, which is a potential counter defense. Now, keep in mind at all times, A person could use hundreds of subgenres of the same emotional manipulative behaviour of, say, the saviour role or the oppressed victim. So this is one example of potentially hundreds that could happen. And this is why I'm giving you an example, and it's for you to write them down, become as creative as possible, and to look at all aspects of what could happen. We've got here a person in a work role, and that's one of hundreds that could happen. Person in a work role. And now one person is becoming the saviour for, say, you in a workplace situation. They're doing all of the work themselves, and they're starting to do more and more of your job role as well, making it an imbalance of energy, making the fact that you're doing less and less work becoming codependent with them. Now, they may or may not realise what they're doing. It could be that they're trying to prove themselves, or it could be that they want more connection by doing all of the work for somebody else. However, if that's happening, it is going to disempower you. So what you could do is take it to a sheet. Start to write it down on paper or on an Excel spreadsheet, whatever it may be. And what you do is you list out all of your job role and you list out all of their job role. And then you put them down into, say, 2 columns. And then you ask yourself, well, how much of their job are they doing and how much of your job are they doing? And then you could potentially show it to them. Now, there are many ways that you can look at this. You could ask them to say, well, I know you're doing all my work as well. I really appreciate it, but, or you could say that actually you enjoy your job and you want to take back that role because it's actually disempowering you. Again, it's going to depend on the individual, and you're going to have to make your own judgment if you're going to talk to somebody using an emotional manipulative behaviour, because keep in mind again, emotional manipulative behaviour hides in plain sight. They might just say that they're really passionate. They might say that they really want to help you. Or they might come back like we saw here. They're saying, well, you've got so much on your plate at the moment. Or it could be you're going through a challenge at home. And they're saying, well, I'm only doing all this work for you because you've got your new children, or you've got the pet that's not well, or you're trying your best to learn a new language, or whatever it may be. And there'll always be a reason why they're doing more. Okay, so then area number 6, when is it not a manipulation? Remember, emotional manipulative behaviour hides in plain sight. It poses as one thing, but is actually something completely different. So when it's not a manipulation, when a person is not using a saviour emotionally manipulative behaviour, is when it's a person who is in your life and you're going through a difficult time. They can see that you're struggling in some way. They just want to help in to rebalance you, to get you back on your feet. And then once you're back on your feet, they step back because they know that you can support yourself. Whereas when a person's using emotional manipulative behaviour of the saviour, it will be where you might be having a tough time. They step in, rebalance you. And then when you can stand on your own 2 feet again, like you can see with these wooden mannequins, they don't step back. They continue to carry you. So even though you can do it by yourself, they keep carrying you, which makes you weaker and weaker and weaker. Okay, so that is the overview of the saviour emotional manipulative behaviour. And I'm sure you can see if you watch the prior video of how codependent the emotional manipulative behaviour of the oppressed victim and the saviour role can become hopelessly connected to each other. And if you see people, say, in romantic relationships where one partner is the oppressed victim and the other partner is the saviour role. And I will say again, as I'm very vocal about this, and it's really important we understand this, that online again, we can see these gurus and they'll go, the narcissist this and the gaslighter that, and they make it very almost horrible to see other people using manipulative behaviour. But I'm here to tell you now, keep that 3-step process that we discussed in the last video in mind. We've got a person who goes through an attack in some way when they're too young to be able to defend themselves, they're overwhelmed. Then they have a trauma reaction, part number 2. And then after that trauma reaction, they start to use emotional manipulative behaviour to try to re-regulate what they're going through. And it's because they're trying to cope with their own trauma. Okay, so that is an overview of the Saviour emotionally manipulative behaviour. So maybe sit down with your journal, write everything out, ask yourself if it's showing up in your life, or what I'm going to introduce now is this something you use on other people? Because when I was going through this myself, I found it easy to say that person's using emotional manipulative behaviour, that person's using emotional manipulative behaviour. But the question was I using emotional manipulative behavior on other people? And the answer to that question is most often yes. We don't even realize in many situations that we use emotional manipulative behavior. I'm not saying you do, but it's important to ask yourself, if you see it in other people, what may you be using without even realizing it? So that's just another question for you to add in to the list of questions that we've been going through all the way through these videos so far. Okay, so any thoughts or perspectives or expansions on what we've discussed so far, feel free to put them in the comments section below, because I always say you never know, your comment could change somebody else's life for the better. And with all that said, I look forward to seeing you in the next video, which is about the emotionally manipulative behavior of the I'm too busy.